Hello and welcome to Change a Trois. My name is Raymond Jetson, and this is a space where I get to invite two change agents, typically from different generations, to join me in a conversation about their respective work and their shared work. The goal is to create an authentic conversation with an intergenerational flair added for interest. And I am unbelievably excited to begin this journey with two just amazing people, and I can't wait to see what emerges from their shared experience in the same container. Serina Bian is an ecosystem and partnerships builder working on local and national social healing. This summer, she'll be joining the Office of the Surgeon General to work on advancing public health campaigns, fostering community and connection. She is the co-founder of Social Healing Collective, a community of young leaders building new models of care and community to heal America's profound injustices and social divides. Marc Freedman is CEO and president of Encore.org. He's also one of the nation's leading experts on the longevity revolution. His most recent work, How to Live Forever, has become an immediate classic and a must-read for anyone with an interest in a sustainable model of work and world. Marc is the originator of the Encore career idea linking second acts to greater good. He co-founded the Experience Corps and also spearheaded the creation of the Encore Fellowships and the Purpose Prize, which is an annual prize for social entrepreneurs in the second half of their life. Serina and Marc, greetings, and thank you guys so much for your willingness to share in this conversation today.
Thanks so much, Ray. I've been very much looking forward to talking with the two of you.
Couldn't agree more.
So let's dive right in with an interesting twist that I have started using in all of the conversations that I share with really interesting people. And Serina, I'll put you on the hot seat. So who is Serina Bian in 25 words or less?
I am a Chinese American daughter of immigrants, 24 years old, born in Michigan, now living in San Francisco. Passionate about social healing, intergenerational connection, and this crisis of disconnection in America.
All right. Marc Freedman?
Well, just reading the question in advance produced an existential crisis for me. I haven't been allowing myself to answer that question. I guess I would say I think of myself as an accidental social entrepreneur. I never really set out to start an organization. I really wanted to study other people who were doing that. And in my home life, I'm an old dad. I'm just about to turn 63 next week, and I got 11, 13, and 15-year-old children. So those are two parts of the answer.
So I love the accidental entrepreneur, and I identify a little differently, but to the old dad part. And so I share that space. And so thank you guys. And so Marc, I'll stay with you. What is the big thing that's motivating your work these days?
Well, I started out interested in mentoring, which I know is something that you, Ray, have also spent a lot of time doing and thinking about. And the idea of generativity, that older people could find meaning and purpose and a legacy through investing in and connecting with younger generations. And that led to the creation of Experience Corps that you mentioned earlier. But one of the things that happened very quickly, the realization was that there was so much mutuality in these bonds. I remember talking to the Experience Corps members, and and they were confused about where the name even came from. They thought it was we thought of it as a way of honoring the experience of older people. They thought it was a program you joined to have experiences. They thought they were getting more out of it. And that theme of mutuality, I think for me, has kind of over time evolved into the idea of co-creation, of, how can we most fully not just bring older and younger people together for mutual benefit, but to benefit the broader community, the broader society. And I feel like that's been underdeveloped and underappreciated and underexplored. And so I'm really very much passionate about this idea of co-generation, of older and younger people and those in the middle, kind of co-creating a better future.
Yeah, and so I'll say this back to you because it had such power and resonance with me. I want to make certain that I heard it right. And so it is this connection of older and younger generations who are co-creating in ways that bring value to the broader world.
And absolutely. And I think that it's almost counterintuitive that older and younger people have so much investment in the future, but
we do.
Younger people are going to inhabit that future, so they're naturally interested in it. But older people are connected to this world that they won't actually see firsthand themselves, and I feel it at this juncture in life. I started out doing this work, I was in my 20s. Now I'm in my 60s, and the time in between kind of vanished imperceptibly, but I really care about what kind of legacy I leave, we leave. And so I think there's this joint enterprise around a better future that can unite generations.
Serina, I do want to ask you about the big thing that's motivating your work, but I'd just like to ask you, just hearing Marc's description of what's motivating his work, what's your initial reaction?
Yeah, such a beautiful concept of co-generation. And I think one thing that will tie into how I respond to that question you posed, Raymond, but this idea of these differences, as I've just been so curious by that middle ground that can be forged between young and old, and the perceived oppositeness between young and old, but really looking behind it, there is so much mutuality and so much depth, I think, of care and of revealing what it means to be human, I think is what draws me to that concept and to that word. And I just can't wait for this narrative to continue to become pushed more and more into society. Because one thing that I've been thinking about in relation to this mutuality has been this notion of like inner transformation leading to outer transformation, and specifically, how we understand our own selves, our own relationship with our inner wounds and things, and how that can help play a role in creating societal healing. Like, I'm just seeing so much with even the Biden administration's narrative around this being the time of American healing, and seeing how the micro and macro, though, are so interconnected, of how we do anything in our own lives can really impact the larger thing. And I'm so curious and excited to be in conversation with you both, because and perhaps this is a very new narrative I've been trying to explore in my own head, but as a young person trying to really think about and transform myself in order to create change in society, learning from older people who have cultivated a very rich sense of this self and of this inner life. And I just wonder sort of like where we can each meet in the middle, and together do these courageous acts.
So thank you so much for sharing. At its core, what I sensed, Serina, was just the critical nature of inner healing and inner health, if you will, as being a precursor and a driving force to actually impacting that which is without. Is that an accurate characterization?
Absolutely, yeah. And I would add to that, Raymond, only one example of this past summer, when the election was happening in the fall and I briefly organized on the Biden campaign. I live in a nuclear family that is politically polarized. And I just found myself both campaigning at the national level and also struggling with the same questions within my own family system, and just thinking about, how deeply connected, how we treat and have these difficult conversations in our own families, in our own neighborhoods, is in many ways, I think, just as important as doing this organizing work at that national level. So I just confirming what you're sharing and sharing an example of that.
Marc, what jumps out at you when you hear Serina's description of what's motivating her work?
Yes, so much. The main thing I'm feeling is I just want to ask the two of you a lot of questions, which is probably just a testimony to of gratitude to bringing us together. I've been thinking from kind of another angle that this idea of bringing older and younger people together could be a real opportunity to bridge divides. I feel like John Powell, who is a law professor at Berkeley, talks about short bridges in society. And I feel like this is one of the short bridges. There's some long bridges. But I was struck a couple of years ago. I was reading speeches from Maggie Kuhn, who had started the Gray Panthers, which is this radical elder organization. The motto was "Old and Young in Action Together." And then I read Ben Sass's book, the conservative Nebraska senator, and he had a chapter in it on fleeing age segregation. And I started looking at these quotes from Ben Sass and from Maggie Kuhn. And if you didn't know, I'm sure they wouldn't have agreed on 99% of the issues of the day, but they agreed on this issue that it was really important for older and younger people to interact in daily life. I think for this inner healing reason to begin with. I was so taken by that point that you were making, Serina, and I felt like one of the ways that breaking generations apart, it makes it really hard for us to live different parts of our lives. If we don't have experience with people at other stages, it's hard to grow old gracefully if you never met anybody who's older. And then how do we live in this multi-generational society if we have so little contact? But maybe that's a place where we could start building some bridges and go from there.
Serina, I know the whole notion of bridging divides is something that resonates with the very core of much that you have given yourself to do.
Yeah. And Marc, I do have so many questions, and specifically around that, I just wrote down short bridges, which I wasn't familiar with the short and long, perhaps, bridges. So I'm curious to do more research on that. I'm so struck by the idea of the home and the neighborhood and proximity as a place, like a meeting ground for this intergenerational, co-generational work. And I would just love to hear more, Marc and Ray, what you all have seen. Excuse me, Ray, if I'm not.
No, please go.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Just because I've seen, and I think there has been this narrative amongst young people, particularly those young adults perhaps who have recently graduated and are working, of physical space and neighborhood becoming less important than other factors such as work or friendship. And I get so curious every time I step into different neighborhoods and in my own where there is not that sort of cultural norm of social connection. And I know that there are people across many different generations that live in neighborhoods. So I would just love to hear if that's been something that has been on your minds, and how you imagine a world in which there is that sort of place-based, co-generational, intergenerational connection.
Yeah, I think it's the key, and I'm also curious, Ray, with your experience in this realm. I for some reason I keep going back to Experience Corps, but one of the really striking questions that came out of that of Experience Corps, which just works so well and so effortlessly, it seemed. It led to this question of, why doesn't this just happen naturally? Why do we actually need a program to connect older and younger people in these mutually beneficial ways? And so I started, rummaging around to try to understand why that natural connection doesn't happen. And it led to the realization that, in so much of American society, certainly not all communities, but over the course of the last century, we really put a lot of pressure on generations to go into separate spaces, young people in schools, middle people in workplaces, older people in places like senior centers and nursing homes and retirement communities, and on and on. And the generational twains stopped meeting. And I think housing was one of the most devastating ways in which we separated generations out. And so I almost feel like we forgot, outside of families in a lot of ways, how to connect with each other across generations. And I had this experience. I live in a neighborhood now where it turns out that there's a couple who are in their 80s that live 2 doors down, and they become surrogate grandparents to our kids. And it's just so enriching. It's not like anything profound happens. It's really day-to-day kinds of things. And I just wonder how we could. I feel like we marshaled incredible social innovation and creativity to keep people from having contact with each other, and now we need to be as creative in bringing people together in these mundane ways of daily life as we've been about splitting them apart. But Ray, we've talked some about this. I'm really curious your reaction too. That's such a great question.
So for me, one of the things that I continue to try to lift up as I engage, and for me, especially younger people who are really passionate about making change and creating better worlds in so many different areas. One of the things that I frequently say to them is that life must become your laboratory. Mm-hmm. That it cannot be something that is this thing that you put in your briefcase or book bag when you get home, or when you go to the gym, or to your whatever your connecting activity with friends or family. That it all is a laboratory for that which motivates you, for that which drives you. And if it is this connectivity or co-creating, if it is this message of internal healing, then everywhere you go actually becomes a petri dish to experiment. And it doesn't have to be at the office or at a meeting place that has been organized and has this scripted set of activities. I think it is in the organic and seeking to identify at the local coffee shop an opportunity to create a container for that which I feel most passionate about to happen. And so this notion of life as a laboratory for that which motivates me most is just a concept that I try to practice, Mark and Serina, but also to share with others as a perspective to bring.
That's so beautiful and well said, Ray. And I could not agree more, and was actually trying to, ahead of our conversation, articulate what you just said of it's like an orientation in how one lives life, not necessarily a job or a profession. And I was reading John Lewis's memoir yesterday, and there was this one part of it, I think I wrote it down somewhere, but talking about before they went on any protests, whether it was a sit-in or freedom rides or any march, we prepared ourselves and were disciplined. We were committed to the way of peace, the way of nonviolence, the way of life as that way of living. And that was so inspiring to me of committing in all aspects of life, in the moments that it's most obviously called to you, but also in those times in which, you know, other people can't see, or there is no formal group or organization for this. So so great that to hear you reflect that.
And so both of you guys have just lifted up some absolutely wonderful questions. Before I move on, I just want to ask Mark and Serina, when you think about your motivating work these days, what's motivating your work? When you think, Mark, of this notion of co-generation, which I so absolutely love, and Serina, the criticality of the inner self in impacting that which is outer. Is there a critical question that you just like to lift up in this moment, beyond the absolutely powerful ones that you already have? Mark, I'll go to you first.
These are hard questions.
They're good. They're good.
And I can't quite put my finger on a response to it, but it really is at the intersection of the outer and inner. But what is it that older and younger people need from each other and can give to each other in the most fundamental human way? Because we know, you look at a grandparent-grandchild relationship, and it's different from a parent-child relationship. And, you know, more broadly outside of the family, what is it that's unique? And so I've been watching a lot of movies lately to try to come up with some answer to that. And there are so many beautiful stories that are being told through film these days about that capture this relationship, and captured in ways that cross age and race, which is really one of my favorite is a film from New Zealand, Hunt for the Wilder People, that came out in 2016. It's the same director who made Jojo Rabbit, and then another one that I just saw was Driveways, which is this beautiful film made by a Korean-American director, Andrew Ahn, about a mother and child who go to clean out the mother's sister's house after she's passed away. They're Asian American, and the next door neighbor is Brian Dennehy. I don't know if Brian Dennehy will ring a bell for you, Serina, but probably for Raymond and I. He just died, and they both depict these very powerful relationships. So I think that's what is it that's unique about this love that crosses generational lines, that crosses family lines? What's the
yeah? What is the essence? What is that which is translated, shared? What is the essence of that connectivity? And as you were describing it, Mark, I found myself thinking, what if even as individuals we began to ask, what is it that I am really bringing to this relationship? What is it not only am I bringing, but that I am benefiting from, I'm learning from, I'm growing from? Powerful questions. And we're not here to answer them all, but to simply say that they are really important questions. Serina, is there a question you'd lift up?
Yeah, I think one of the questions that I would lift up pertains to like the essence of both connectivity as well as belonging. And said most directly, I'm just curious how secular society might learn more than it currently is from spiritual and religious traditions when it comes to creating social healing, bridging divides, creating co-generational movements, and just studying the centuries-old ways in which these structures have allowed for very naturally the integration of different generations together. And I'm so curious what these structures might look like and be applied to, such as in the neighborhood setting, in the extended family setting, and all those different examples, Mark, that you had offered up across cultures. Yeah.
And so and again, I'm joining you in lifting up the questions, not in any way posing to answer or even asking for answers. But as I hear you describing, first of all, I'm drawn to the similarity and the distinction between connecting and belonging. That is an interesting interface in and of itself, but learning from the religious traditions and practices and institutions, and then I am immediately drawn, Serina, as the younger member of this trio. How then does the issue of the younger generation moving further and further away from organized religion, how would that even impact that learning? And would there be a real valuing of the institutions that have otherwise been not held to possess a real value or authenticity to younger and emerging generations?
That's such a good question. And I also won't pretend to have all the answers, but as someone who did grow up attending church, I attended a church in Detroit that was comprised mostly of Chinese and some Korean immigrants and their families. And it was very intergenerational. And now I identify as not religiously affiliated, but really seeking. I would love to participate and find a home religiously and spiritually. And, I completely see that trend of the lack of affiliation, and yet there still remains and even is increasing this desire for meaning, for spirit, for purpose. And a generation that recognizes that there are so many movements that need to be created around climate, around justice. And I guess just when I turn to history and I look at the movements like the Civil Rights Movement and just how front and center faith and grace and religion were to that, I almost just have hope that, and I see inklings in small ways in which I think this generation, my generation, is perhaps reopening ourselves back up to this with the recognition of the evolving institutions and the evolving churches and practices at play. But I sense that tension, and and I have this deep hope that there will be greater discernment and nuance in figuring out what to take and what to change of those.
Well, I share, and I'm sure Marc in his own way joins me in sharing that hope. And so what I want to do now is kind of a moving toward the home stretch, if you will, of our time together. So I'll start. Serina, you have Marc Freedman on a Zoom call with you and in conversation with you. You've read, you've seen, and and oh, by the way, I'm here also. But primarily with Marc in mind, what would you like to hear from him in this conversation?
What a great way of framing that question, right? What would I like to hear from Marc Freedman? So many things. The one that really sticks out to me, and I've wondered this for years, Marc, having read your work and just have been such a great admirer, is you talk a lot about the power of listening and of what you've demonstrated so gracefully of being so curious, more curious about others. And I just sense, and I think we're probably in alignment here, that of this belief that in America, we need greater spaces for listening, for opportunities to share our stories across generations, combined with this belief of the power of local community, and that being a place where there is so much opportunity to connect more and to make it a part of this daily mundane life that we live, and that I think ultimately impacts culture. And so I guess, Marc, I would just be so curious about this notion of creating programming and structure to facilitate acts of listening. Like, what if there was a neighborhood listening corps? Or what if this was, in addition to the existing cores or structures, like just new movements where we simply listen to one another? Like, I would just love to hear your imagination run when it comes to how we can create greater spaces or structures of listening, co-generation, across generations.
I really appreciate that whole reflection, and it made me think of a book which is somewhere stuffed in that shelf over there that StoryCorps put out with the title "Listening is an Act of Love," and but we focus so much on developing our point of view and our voice, and you're both public voices fellows, and it's obviously very important to develop our voices, but when it comes to the listening part, I feel like there is so much less attention to that. I think, Serina, you mentioned in an earlier note John Gardner, who was a mentor to me, and at one point we were having a conversation and a little bit like this one, and kind of reflecting on the big issues, and he said that most people focus their whole life, and he had spent much of his life trying to be interesting, and it finally learned later in life that the real key is to be interested. And I think that listening really comes out, our ability to listen comes out of genuinely being interested in other people, and cultivating and honing those skills. And maybe we need a public listeners fellowship along with public voices to teach all of us how to do that. And I've been thinking about it as I spent my whole life being supported and mentored by older people who were really good at listening, and now I'm one of them, and I'm not sure I'm nearly as good at it as they were. And I so when you were talking about that, I was feeling a kind of sense of of the importance of really honing those skills for personally, thanks.
So, Marc, I do think it is that genuine interest in others, recognizing that there is value, that there is value in the personhood of others, and that it's worth my effort to actually be inquisitive as to knowing that person in a different way. And so thank you for that. And so, Marc, you've had the pleasure shared with me of just hearing the wonderful thoughts and work of Serina Bian, is there something that you'd like to hear from her in this conversation?
Absolutely. I feel like I want to pick up on all the earlier points you made, Serina, including the faith question about how faith institutions can play this role. It reminded me of, I went to an Anglican church in Singapore a few years ago, which had started something called Project Spring Winter, where they had both a preschool and a nursing home on their property, and that they had developed and were trying to bring generations together. And then it made them realize that because that they had so many of their worship services had been segregated by age. There were children's services but I was going to ask Ray too, as the pastor among us, what Scripture has to tell us about this idea of cogeneration. They had a big passage from Jeremiah that was underscoring their work. But so maybe for another conversation, I'd love to talk about that. But Serina, you mentioned John Lewis, and I think for a lot of people, including a lot of older people, when John Lewis wrote that beautiful op-ed in the New York Times that he had written before he passed away, and in it, was really eloquent about the ways older and younger people could work together for change. I think a lot of older people that I talked to really were grateful for that, because I think there's a sense that, as we're going through big changes in our society, a racial reckoning, that what younger people really need from older people is to get out of the way. You had your chance. You didn't get nearly as far as you need to. Now it's our time. And I hear that in so many other ways. Like I hear this kind of zero-sum idea that older and younger people, need to power share. Older people need to give up power. Younger people need to assume that power. But isn't there a better way? And what, as a young person who's deeply dedicated to social healing and change, what do you want from me and Ray and our generation? What do you need from us? How can we be good allies in the groundbreaking work that your generation is doing? Tell us what you want from us. We're poised to do what you need.
Oh my gosh. That's it is just so amazing how I don't know who said this, but the idea of like we are each living pieces of history, and that in and of itself is, I think, just such a reason to be in connection and to be in community. And so I'm continually curious, and I think my generation could really use additional of that sort of historical wisdom, and also that despite the time difference in which we were each 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds, like we have all been 20-something-year-olds, 30-something-year-olds. And I do think that there are these like continual themes that pop up across each of these different decades of life. And it does seem from my perspective as someone who is both at once working towards social healing and trying to understand, what a life of that looks like, while also being a 24-year-old who is trying to navigate my relationship with my family as a 24-year-old, and all these other parts of life like relationships and love. And given, Ray, what you had mentioned of how life does not compartmentalize, it is in every moment. I think there is just so much that I would love for my generation to learn about, just the uncompartmentalized aspect of like how to fully live into one's decade of life in pursuit of justice, while also being in pursuit of personal fulfillment, I suppose, and just how intricately connected those all can be. So I just get sad sometimes, I think, thinking about and hearing, admittedly, sometimes that notion of, well, let the old people step away and just blazingly truck through. And I hope that narrative continues to dwindle away as we just recognize how interconnected it all is. And the one other thing that I'll add is just, Marc, what you were reflecting on as a father, and just how that act of parenting is something, and growing older and caring for parents while having children is something that I think my generation is now moving into as we're beginning to care for our parents and thinking about, what might starting a family look like. And I think that's just another place in which I think there is so much wisdom, so much curiosity that can be exchanged. And in these acts of care, I think there's, just so much more that can be explored there. So I'll stop there.
So Serina and Marc, I feel so privileged to just have been a part of, and to listen to the richness of the conversation that both of you guys have helped to co-create. I get to hear it first. I'm sure there will be lots of others who will listen as we share the recording of this conversation, but it means so much more to me to just experience it in real time. And so I am grateful, sincerely, to you, Serina, and to you, Marc, for the time and for bringing your full selves to the conversation. I couldn't have imagined a better way to start the Change a Trois experience on my website. And so thank you guys deeply for just bringing your full selves to the conversation. Serina, Bian, Marc Freedman, thank you so much for your time, and may God's richest blessings be with the both of you.
Thanks so much, Ray. I'm already looking forward to the next installment.
Agreed. This was incredible, and you're an impressive interviewer.